Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening again to another episode. Did you know that every cell in your body consists of energy and that everything we eat, do, and move and our environment impacts that? Ryan Carter will tell you how to impact that in a positive way. Please hit the subscribe button in Spotify or Apple Music. It massively helps me to invite more podcast guests. Enjoy the show. Good afternoon. I'm not sure if it's your afternoon, but it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon over here, Ryan. Very happy to have you on another episode of the Yorick Frijters Show. Last time we spoke about health in general from your perspective, which I found very informative for the listener. But what I took away from that conversation we had, and of course why I've been following you, is that you base so much out of light and energy. But that is still something I did not, where I was not able to deconstruct it completely for myself. So that's why I wanted to talk to you. So how are you?
I'm good. Enjoying the light as we speak. It's 7 o'clock in the morning here in Nicaragua. I think our last conversation I was in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, you were.
And so again, a different side of the world, but again, still applying the principles of light. I think in that conversation, I was actually getting light through the window.
Yeah.
But again, at the same time, it's first principles. And I'm happy to go anywhere you want to go on this podcast.
Perfect. Looking forward to it, definitely. How long have you been back in Nicaragua? Because I remember that you were in London for a few days, weeks, and then somewhere else, right?
Yeah, so I went to London for the Health Optimization Summit.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, I think I spent another 2 weeks in the UK and then went to Paris, went to Rome via train, which was pretty cool. And then went back to Abu Dhabi to see some friends and family. And then Barcelona, Madrid, and then returned back to Nicaragua and been back since maybe July, I think. So like literally 2 months.
Wow.
But again, this is the base. So before heading out there, or when I was in Abu Dhabi, I returned back here for 2-3 months. So this is the base of Vitae, Ryan Carter.
Sounds good. I've never been there, but it feels like at least it looks good, and it's also a very free country, right?
Well, I mean, every country's got their own ups and downs, and Nicaragua is part of like the Central American community of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. It's fairly different from Mexico or Costa Rica, but it's one of the poorest countries in Central America. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a bit of corruption here and there. But again, the people, the country itself is absolutely beautiful. It's not really exploited. And again, it's just basically a place for health. And that's why I'm here. Space, greenery, the weather. Literally, it was like pouring down with rain 5 minutes ago, and now it's just like sunny. It's got abundance of food. It's fairly reasonable to live here, basically. So it makes a good place for someone who does what I do, who works online, to live basically and thrive. And that's what it's about. And again, I can live in the UK and do well, but again, like, why would I want to do that? So again, I've got the freedom, and maybe I haven't got the responsibilities as other people. So again, I'm going to express that with all the knowledge that I've installed. It'll be...
I can imagine, because like you said, with the different responsibilities, but when you traveled back to London and all over Europe and all that, did you notice that in your health as well? Differences?
Yeah, I mean, my health is fairly robust across the board, so I didn't really notice anything. But again, for my awareness of what I was picking up, it was just like there's a lot of tired, rundown people. And again, you can put like diseases on top of that. But on a general viewpoint, like there's a lot of unhealthy, unhappy, tired people in the Western world. And sure, they get paid better. They maybe live and have better conveniences than life in Nicaragua. But again, are they happy? Are they living life, essentially? And again, that's a principle of like Vitae, which basically stands for living life. So again, these people are not living life. I feel on the outside, obviously I don't know them, so I'm just judging here right now, but I'm sure if you opened up their brain and dissected them and got into a place of awareness, then they'll probably make out, yeah, they're not really happy, they're struggling. And again, that was in London mainly, and it was a big shock returning. But again, it's a shock and experience in every single place I go. So again, even like the countryside, I say it's like there's much more happier people there. And again, why? Well, again, there's much more open spaces. And obviously, like you're taking this conversation indoors, your visual field is actually reduced. That actually has a direct connection to like how you perceive the world. So again, like what I see is like, yeah, I see my house here, but like I see greenery, there's abundance. I've got full spectrum, basically, visual fields just going off in the distance. And again, that creates a sort of a state of abundance. And again, ancestrally or evolutionary, we would have had that, where now we're basically encapsulated inside our modern cities and we don't see abundance. So again, there's a connection there. But again, in the countryside, again, I feel happier there. There's a big difference. And then taking that to like Paris, to Rome, again, I do think like those countries do have a stronger culture where they're more proud of their heritage, and you do see that in their food, where again there's less probably like junk foods and fried chicken shops or kebab shops. And sure, obviously there still is some, but again they actually take pride in their national dishes and the cuisine. Again, that's very apparent in Italy, obviously in Rome and the Romans, and again it was some amazing food there. But again, it's just that concrete jungle which is problematic. And then Abu Dhabi is just like a whole nother different level, because again, I went there when it was like the prime of summer. And again, it's just like unlivable, basically. The ancestors who would have lived in Abu Dhabi or UAE, they would have done some very strange things to offset that. And again, obviously modern people don't do that. And again, that's probably why they have a large amount of their health issues across the whole of the Middle East, where it's issues with their metabolism, their diets, their health issues, fertility. And again, they plaster over it because they have got convenience, they have got more disposable income than most people. But again, they plaster over it where really their health underneath it is basically shambles. And again, that's on a mental and emotional level as well. And then obviously returning back here is just like, wow. Literally, when I stepped back in like Nicaragua, where we got collected from like the border from Costa Rica, again, it was like we got back at like 9 o'clock at night, and like you could just see the sky and see the stars. And I was in the back of a pickup truck. And again, like just sitting there, just watching the stars. And again, like driving back, we're at the south of Nicaragua. So again, we're around this lake called Lake Nicaragua, which has this 2 volcanic islands on it, Ometepe. And again, there's just like this insane energetic field around here. Again, it's not perfect, but again, it just feels so humble and aligned to be in this sort of environment. And again, maybe you experience it if you go to the countryside, where your nervous system basically just can breathe and feel at ease without having to hear police sirens, or again, hear like your neighbors having a domestic argument or whatnot. But again, like all I hear is like cockerels in the background, a few noises of monkeys. There's no air pollution with like airplanes going by. There's no chem, because basically they just can't afford it here. And that's just how it is. So again, it was a good experience, the whole travel. It was good to see friends again that I haven't seen in a while. It was good to see some family. And again, I went with my girlfriend from Nicaragua, and for her, it was the first time leaving the country. It's the first time of her going on a plane to see other cultures. And again, I think from her view, it's like amazing to see. For me, it's nothing, but for her, it's like a whole experience, because again, she's the first person in her family tree to actually leave her country, basically, and go abroad. Because again, it's so difficult for them to actually leave the country, because they need visas to actually go to Costa Rica, or they need visas to go to Mexico, which again are the only countries where you can go to Europe from. And again, there's other ways around it, but again, you still need a visa. And again, for them to have a visa, to go to the capital to apply for a visa, is very difficult. So again, it was an amazing experience to watch someone else in that sort of culture and see how they responded to it as well. And again, they were like, homesick, I would say after Rome, it was just like, it was more than enough. They're ready to go back into their little Nicaragua state of living. Again, that's just basically their stress response to that sort of environment. And again, obviously, if you're exposed to that, you can handle some train noises. You can handle the proximity of people right up in your face, breathing on you. If you're not used to that, it's overwhelming. So again, her stress response from that was just a bit too much. But again, she enjoyed the different cultures, the different foods, seeing different people. Again, the Middle East was a big experience for her, just to see something like that, because again, it's very like film, like the movies. Basically, it's very far fetched to see like seeing here. It's just like a whole different world. But again, I don't wish to go back to Europe anytime soon.
Well, looking at your background, I can completely imagine that you do not want to trade any scenery with that. And what you say about looking at the stars and the surrounding that is so completely different, it's not something that, you know, when people go on holiday, it's like, oh, it felt so different hanging out there. It actually has impact on your body, right? Being there, and that when you talk about that different perspective, I always become very self-aware when I'm podcasting with you because I notice all the lights that's on me and that I am inside, and you are always sitting outside with the sun.
I mean, on that point, I think that's a big principle that, again, I'm not ignorant of knowing that. So again, it's just like, obviously I know I live a completely different life to most people. And again, I don't think that this is obviously hard to like go from Europe to where I am right now. But again, this actually changes your metabolism and physiology massively. And again, this is where you go into like the nutritionist or nutrition diet camps with like, okay, cool, the animal-based diet is the way forward, or low or paleo or vegan. Again, the majority of the time, again, just removing the junk food for most people is going to be enough. But what you don't see is that typically these gurus or influencers, maybe you could throw me in that back bracket as well, that they live a different life to most people. So again, let's look at the example of like Ben Greenfield, Paul Saladino, maybe Dave Asprey, Mark Sisson. These people live in a bubble, basically. And again, that's not to be critical of them, but again, they live in a bubble that most people can't really attain or have. Again, they got properties like this where there's no next door neighbors. There's no power grid inflicting on them. They got abundance and maybe got financial freedom as well. So again, I don't have that yet, but like they probably got business companies that, again, gives them constant stream of income. And again, they don't need to sweat or stress over what most people stress over, because again, they live in this sort of bubble. And again, that has a knock-on effect with your physiology. Because again, if you're constantly thinking, okay, shit, I've got this communication bill to pay, or I've got my gas, my water bill to pay, or my daughter needs to go to university, how am I going to afford that? Like, again, these are real life problems. But again, it's easy to get caught up and see, okay, this person from Costa Rica is just purely saying, okay, eating animal based and fruit is the way forward. It's got nothing to do with those other bits and pieces below the surface, which again, it does. But again, I'm not ignorant of that. And again, that's the difference of like when I'm speaking one-to-one with clients, that's coming into sort of the language, the methodology of how we work clinically together. Because again, I need to know where they're at, how that is affecting. And then we put things in place. Or again, maybe we put a plan in place of where they can go away on like a sort of autumn, winter holiday. Or again, maybe they think about these things where they decide to move to the countryside. So again, that is the real change into your biology. And again, yeah, it can, diet, nutrition can be very powerful. It can have a role in things. But again, it's basically the raw ingredients, a bit like a recipe. It's the raw ingredients. How that recipe gets created is dependent on the chef, basically, or the cook, or the method, or how well the instructions were shared or communicated. That's affected by your environment, basically. That's the concept of light, water, and magnetism. And again, nutrition actually falls into that light, water, magnetism concept as well. But again, that's the concept of how these ingredients get transformed to the actual end product or the experience, essentially. That's what it's about. And again, a nutritionist only gets taught about the raw ingredients. They don't get too much talk about how that actual recipe gets formulated, how the magic happens, basically. And again, it's very delicate. Again, like we can see in modern science, like the influence of artificial light at nighttime, the influence of abundance of non-native EMF around you, the influence of dirty electricity, the influence of like lead exposure, antibiotic use, all these sort of scenarios, they inflict change, and they're going to influence what's being expressed or translated, or how receptors are working, or enzyme kinetics are working. But again, it might sound difficult, but that's not the most important thing. And again, the most important thing in the human body fundamentally comes down to like how water works. And again, the water concept will be working on how hydrogen is working and oxygen, basically. And again, like we know, without oxygen, the human body can't really survive that long. So again, that's having a role with energy production, the food that we're sort of breaking down, because again, they all have these sort of unique hydrogen bonds in them. And again, that will be related to sort of carbon dioxide, carbon. That would be related to like sort of the carbohydrates. And within it, there's oxygen in it as well. But again, that's how we break things down. But again, it's sort of like the binary code. And again, we also make water within our metabolism. So again, we reverse how plants do their job. We do the opposite. We utilize the oxygen. Sorry, we exhale the carbon dioxide. And again, the plants utilize carbon dioxide. We need oxygen, but plants exhale oxygen. So again, it's sort of this synergistic relationship that we have. And again, it's basically these concepts are being recycled and shared between humans and plants. And it's very delicate. The carbon chains, the type of hydrogen in these the isotopes of these hydrogen, these all matter on the smallest scale, on the sort of quantum biophysics level of entanglement, of tunneling. And again, that's really where our metabolism, and again, what we measure, or what most people measure in the blood, doesn't really go to that level. They're looking at sort of the organ tissue level. And again, there has some time and place for that, of detecting diseases and functions of certain organs. But again, where we can go deeper is looking at the metabolomics. So again, this is like metabolites of our metabolism. This is actually what's happening right now, and how the environment is interacting what's being expressed. But again, that still doesn't go down to the level of like how quantum physics or quantum biology really works. But again, that's likely going to be coming, and that'll be looking at light emission from certain things. That'll be looking at things like deuterium levels.
Well, when you are talking about those processes, you talk about energy absorption, energy processing, and energy releasing, and that process. And I think that on a practical level, that's something I would like to discuss with you. Is that possible to describe that in a practical way? How can we look at our own body, our own environment, and start with the absorption?
Okay, so again, like you probably are aware, and the listeners are aware, that our body is largely made from water. And again, if you think about a lake, or I don't know, maybe if you've got like a glass of water and you pull it outside in the sunlight, what happens to the temperature of that water? It increases. It's absorbing the light energy, because in that water, there's electrons, basically. And electrons only interact with photons. So they become excited. Now it's actually changing the thermal regulation of the water. But again, that's absorbing energy, the EMF energy from the sun. And again, our bodies, like we just said, are made and composed of water. We produce water inside our cell. We have buckets, literally buckets of water inside our cell. And they are, again, absorbing our environment around it. Okay? So that's the concept of like absorption. But on top of that, we also have certain molecules which we could describe as chromophores or semiconductors, which also interact with sort of EMF spectrum from the sun or from the earth, basically, which is, again, a big electrical ball, essentially. So again, like, you're very aware of this, or maybe most people are aware of this concept called grounding, where basically you take your shoes off and anything non-insulating, and you basically plug in to the earth on a natural material, or even in the sea. Well, basically you're just conducting electricity there. So again, we have sweat glands, which again secrete sodium chloride as an example. And again, that is enhancing the grounding effect, basically. And again, what happens is also we can apply when there's like thunderstorms, you go out in water, you're going to get that you might get electric shock from that, or you might get electrocuted from that. But again, if we understand that, you could also apply that if you put your feet in a bit of water and then ground, you're actually going to get more grounding effects coming in through your body, because again, you're just enhancing how electricity works from one place to the other, basically. And again, we have other things such as cholesterol, which everyone's very familiar with. So again, we transform cholesterol into actual a sort of physical, another property. We could transform that into like vitamin D. We can influence hormone signaling, basically. We can excite aromatic amino acids. We can influence things such as tyrosine and influence its pathway and its metabolism to the levels of like thyroid hormones, to dopamine, to noradrenaline, also to creating melanin, so the pigment on our skin. Like that's the role of tyrosine, just this one amino acid. And again, for me personally, that's where like all these sort of high protein centric diets, which again, a vegan diet can also improve your protein content, because again, it makes you focus more on protein, because that's a bit of a misnomer when you go on a vegan diet. So again, there's more emphasis on protein when you're a vegan. But again, what most of these things happen is they improve your content of your amino acids. And again, that could be phenylalanine, that could be tyrosine, that could be tryptophan. And again, these all have powerful roles on neurotransmitters. So again, things like glutamine, that would be a powerful role of forming glutamate, or that could go on to make GABAic acid, or it could be related to producing serotonin, or it could be related to producing dopamine. And again, this is all happening from the interaction under the influence of light, basically. So again, these amino acids would be in your eyes, they would be on your skin, they'll be inside your gut lining, basically. And again, the environment would be interacting with these proteins. And again, they become entangled or excited. And then with that, that's basically how the body operates. Like I said, that's the raw ingredients of eating protein, or animals or plants with protein in. But again, how that recipe formulates or is influenced, it's from the interaction of the environment, basically. And again, like we know, in the winter where you are, that's where there's more seasonal affective disorder. And again, that's the influence of the environment interacting with your proteins or those molecules, or again, there's a decrease in vitamin D synthesis, because again, cholesterol is not being sort of sulfated or isomerized by the powers of sunlight, basically. But again, like those things are not pathophysiological. They're not problems. Again, like people are like, oh my God, vitamin D goes in the winter in Europe. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. Like that's just how it happens. It's not a disease. It's not a problem. You don't need to do anything about it. I'm from Europe. Our ancestors survived very well without vitamin D all year round. Again, it's the problem of believing and being manipulated via like the government or via supplement companies, where you think you need to have supplements or vitamin D all the time. You don't, basically. It's not how it works. And again, seasonal affective disorder is literally just this made up. Again, it manifests and it is a problem. There's no denying that. But again, it's only a modern dilemma, because again, we believe in sort of homeostasis all year round, where we should be balanced. We should eat balanced foods of macronutrients. And that's just dribble as well. So again, there is ups and downs with our metabolism. Again, there's a great researcher called, I've forgotten his name, but again, it's called the Cell Danger Response, or this is like the title of the work. Robert Navrex, I forget, his name's a bit of a tongue tie. But again, he's a researcher on the cell danger response, and it actually looks at there's a winter and summer metabolism, meaning that purines, DNA, RNA, these amino acids we just discussed, metabolites that were just shared, which we can measure in blood testing. Organic acid testing. There's changes within the season based on the interaction of light, water, and magnetism, basically. But again, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's the modern environment which basically rocks the boat, because again, it's fairly normal in Scandinavian countries to get a bit depressed, to get a bit low, to feel the blues, essentially. it doesn't make it a problem. The other side of the coin is, in the summer, you should be on top of the world. You feel amazing. But again, this is the connection where you are on this planet. It has a role with how you're actually feeling and what should really be going on within your physiology. And again, we are very uniquely different based on our history, based on our maternal health, our grandmother health, experiences, how we perceive things. But again, there is some truth that there should be some discrepancy there. But again, when you're around like the belt of the tropics, like in Nicaragua or even like the Far East or North Africa, Caribbean, like again, there's no drastic change there. The light period, meaning sunset and sunrise, is usually the same all year round. The only context is it's a wet season or a dry season. So again, you don't see disturbances too much with mental health around here. But the issue is most people don't live how I live here. So again, they're still inflicted with Western world, with the invention of the light bulb, with the invention of like Apple, social media. They're still inflicted with this issue. So again, now we've got the context on top of that's actually more difficult to really understand on a personal level, where again, we would think that these people in the tropics would have good vitamin D status, that they have good nitric oxide production, that they'd be lean, that they would eat like more fruit and vegetables. Well, no, that's not a given. Again, eating fruit and vegetables here in Nicaragua is a luxury. It's far cheaper to buy corn, rice, or make gallo pinto, which is like rice and beans, or even eat junk food, or even like Coca-Cola is probably cheaper than buying water here, mineral water. That's what you don't see. And again, they're inflicted with the same issues as people in London or people in Amsterdam or in Barcelona. They're around technology all the time. And again, this disrupts the essence of their physiology. And again, this is why they have obesity problems here. This is why the young girls here get their menstruation at like age 11 and they got breasts growing at like 9. Again, that's not normal. But again, if you understand it, you understand that how generational effects in grandmother and mum are passed down. Again, the apple doesn't drop far from the tree. So again, if mum was using a lot of plastics, which they typically use here, because again, they can't afford the luxury of stainless steel. They can't afford the luxury of good quality plastics, which might be a little bit better. They literally put their hot liquids in styrene cups, or like literally like plastic lunch bags. I'm not too sure if you remember, like when you went to school, you had like a sandwich bag. Literally just put all their liquids in these, they wrap it up, and then they go. Or they make like, it's just like hot food would be put in those things as well.
Oh, wow.
But again, they don't understand this because again, there's a poverty gap, and again, there's an educational gap. And again, it's actually like, it's like feet to like our health, how much shit that basically we can take and we're still standing strong. And again, that will be applied in the Western world as well, where like you look out the window, you'll be like, oh my God, how's that person actually feeling okay when they're basically doing everything under the sun, which is like bad for them, that you hear. So again, it's like the human body is amazing and we can take a lot of crap. Again, it adds up, and it adds up basically in our germline, which basically gets passed on. And again, it just basically makes us more fragile and weaker, basically. And again, that's when we run into problems where we think that the sun is the problem, when in fact it's literally our biology which is the problem. No other wild animal has a problem with the sun. It's only humans that have a problem with the sun. And like we know, we need the sun. Again, we don't need too much of it if we're healthy. And again, the healthier you are, the less sun you actually need. The less skin in the game you actually need, because again, you got more charge. You're absorbing more in your body. So again, you can go without eating food. You can go without sunlight even more. That's what basically I said and described at the start of the show, which is like, I didn't actually feel bad effects from being in Europe around all the EMF and everything else. And even like circadian disruption, I didn't feel that much because again, I've got so much charge in my body that I've got it at my disposal to deal with stresses, to deal with problems. But again, most people don't. Most people are operating on a flat battery. And again, that shows up as like fatigue, are hungry all the time, glucose dysregulation, sleep problems. Because again, you can't sleep well if you don't make energy,
No.
because again, that's connected to adenosine. And again, we make and build up adenosine from producing energy within the cell. So again, people with sleep issues basically just don't have energy.
Yeah, to me, when you explain it like this, it seems so logical, but the underlying principle of all of you've been preaching about in this podcast and in the past couple of years is that everything you do, everything you are, exists in relationship to your environment, to everything you eat. So, and that understanding.
Well, again, it's everything that you think, it's everything that you're processing, it's everything that you're perceiving. Because again, it's just like I'm perceiving that sun right here, but again, that would be very different if you were next door to me. It's completely different. No thing's the same. Again, how I processed that sun yesterday is actually different as well. The sun today is different to how it was yesterday. In actual fact, the sun's got bigger. It's probably emitting more light. Again, because the sun works on like a time scale as well. It's burning. It's got a lifespan. And again, I probably lost some health of my mitochondria on a sort of a large level every single day. And again, aging is basically the accumulation of poor efficiency within our mitochondria, basically. So again, like I need to apply principles. And again, it's very different. Just again, another thing that people think is just because you're in the sun, you're making vitamin D. Again, like obviously UVB. So the UVB there, you're in the sun and you're making vitamin D because you got your skin out. Well, again, no, it doesn't work like that. There's contexts on top of that. Again, like how hydrated are your skin cells? How much sulfur do you have within your skin cells as well? How well is your liver and kidney working? What's the vitamin D receptor like? And again, the point of being in the sunlight with vitamin D is not literally to build your storage levels up. It's actually to influence on a genome level to do the vitamin D receptor. That's the whole point of having vitamin D there and using it. It's not there to, okay, cool, I've got 150 milligrams in my blood measured and that's great. Okay, well, great. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? You can still have high vitamin D levels and be trashed because, again, you could be supplementing your way there. And like we know, it's like having a personal trainer doing the workout for you. It's not the same thing because, again, that's the magic. It's the recipe. It's skin in the game. Everything is sort of formulated and sort of condensed with how everything is working within like your mitochondria, within your genome, within your microbiome, within your environment. Because, again, it's all sort of connected.
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying is what I like from that is that they often say that people are disconnected from nature, right? Modern people are disconnected from nature. I feel like when people eat a burger or when they eat something in general or when they are outside in the sun, I feel like they think that it is separate from them. But that understanding that connection is always there, whether you eat it or whether you consume it outside or your environment. I think that knowledge is a bit lost in society, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even the choice of eating that burger would be a reflection of your health, essentially on multiple layers and levels. Again, that would be influenced on so many different things. And again, that's the thing with like obesity. Obesity is a very complex disease with multiple factors. It's not simply, okay, you're just lazy and you eat too much. No, it's like it's so complex on multiple layers. And again, to reverse it, it's like very hard. It's basically you're literally changing your inside and out and how you're perceiving everything around you to change obesity. And sure, yeah, you can control it and become like a psychopath. And what they do in studies, go and live on a metabolic ward and inflict like a hard fat loss regime. But again, what happens when you come out in the real world? Well, the real world's an open system where, again, there's multiple variables and perceptions of things. And again, that can change. For example, someone could be like a bit timid, or they could be fairly weak in character, let's say, like on a general level. And again, like someone could just say a nasty comment to them, or maybe their boss was a bit harsh with them. And again, that comment can literally just trigger them to go to McDonald's and eat that burger. And again, it doesn't make them a bad person. It's And again, like
That's
at
how
the end of the day,
nature
sure,
works, right?
yeah, but at the end of the day, like McDonald's is not, again, like it depends on like kind of level you are. Because again, like for someone with energy, so someone who doesn't eat enough, again, the body will still process that McDonald's. It still extracts some energy out of something. So saying a starving person from around here who doesn't eat that much, who's fairly skinny and basically malnourished, again, that McDonald's would actually be like a big deal for them, because again, the body still needs energy. Again, that energy found in that would still enhance their defects that they have. And sure, yeah, it's nutrient depleted. It's not the best food going and there's problems with it. But on their level, that would be actually a good thing. It wouldn't be a problem. But again, for the most part, it's mainly in the Western world where there's, again, energy excess and again, the inefficiency of utilizing that energy. And again, that's the defect of one of the problems with obesity or of health issues. And again, that's associated with things such as cancer. Again, being obese is a problem to multiple diseases. But again, it's just understanding obesity. Being fat is not really a problem. And again, 1 in 3 people who are fat are actually relatively healthy. So again, it's actually understanding the context of okay, because again, we know linoleic acid or these rich omega-6s, which everyone bashes around, again, is associated with problems. But again, if you've got a large amount of omega-3s built up within like your adipocytes, then again, it's relatively healthy to a certain degree. If your mechanism's working very well, again, being a bit on the fluffy side when you get older is actually protective. Your body, how your muscles work, actually downregulate the IGF-1 receptor within your muscles when you get older. So again, building muscles is important when you're younger, but again, when you get older, it's not really much of a concern per se. Again, like different times of our health span or our lifespan, our metabolism actually sort of changes. And again, it's natural. And again, think about how a baby grows and develops outside of just when it's born. It's insane the amount of energy it sort of consumes in the growth and its development. It's unbelievable when you actually understand that how a baby's born, how it's in the womb, how it's at this unique size of going out the birth canal, and then how it uses milk as a means of a connection to mum and a fuel source of how it develops its nervous system and its brain. It's literally insane. And again, mum's nutrition has a big role in that. And of course, if mum's eating McDonald's, again, it's not going to have the ingredients needed to shape and to bring like the best about a human experience basically for that child. Because again, we know like breast milk has large amounts of DHA, iodine, vitamin A. Again, it's at the first milk, it's going to provide you basically with like the prebiotics to establish sort of the microbiome. And again, it's key. It's basically like protein, fat, carbs. It's this big macro food, basically, all for growth. Again, this is where the context of like, okay, people now advocating like milk as being a superfood. Again, like, is milk a great product to consume? I don't think there's a problem with it here and there in little bits. But again, I don't think it should be celebrated and championed like it's the best thing ever. Because again, if you understand the principles of milk, it's all to do with growth. And again, when you surpass sort of like 25, 26 years of age, you don't really want those signals all the time to be on, basically. Now, again, you want some, but again, that delicate balance of how lifespan works is that you don't want that signaling all the time. And again, that's where you get some sort of half-truths from people like David Sinclair or like longevity people, because again, there is some truth with like mTOR pathways. So again, that will be like stimulated by methionine, essentially. So again, it's understanding these principles and realizing that, again, like when we consume that milk, again, that might be a bit of a problem. Again, it would be more applied that using fermented milk or milk products would probably be more useful than pure just like milk from another animal. Because again, there's nutrition in there, but there's actually information embedded in that. Because again, that milk from that cow is all for the baby. It's not really truly for human consumption at the end of the day. But again, like I said, someone who needs basic energy or who's really at a disadvantage, any food's going to be good for them. Or anything might be better.
How do I explore that by myself? Because when I think about seasonal food, like vegetables or certain oils, for example, I can find a way with reason. But when I have to think about milk in earlier stages of my life, or milk at the later stage in my life, how do I explore that is not as beneficial as it was 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, so again, hunter gatherers, again, they would have likely used milk, but again, they would have had to domesticated an animal to achieve that, basically. So again, that is on the fringes of Paleo Neolithic time frames.
Mm-hmm.
So again, with that domestication of like goats, cows, basically, that would have been an advantage. But again, it's like, was that actually the first stage of how humans sort of de-evolutionized and went backwards, basically? Again, but again, there's benefits involved with that. That would
Mm-hmm.
be, again, food on demand, a solid food supply, and that would allow development of the community. That would have nourished people where there would have been maybe starvations or issues with food supply chains. So again, there's silver lining there. But again, I don't think there should be any fear around any type of food. Basically, that's actually derived from like a single plant or a single animal with common sense. But again, even like the milk would have a seasonal effect. But again, even with a pinch of salt within modern times, like milk or dairy is a very manufactured processed commodity. And again, like the Dairy Council, again, has got conflicts in science, no doubt about it. Again, they pay for certain studies. But again, that's part and parcel of industry. It doesn't mean that everything that they produce is relatively bad or it's conflicted or a problem. It just means that you just have to take something with a pinch of salt, because again, they're only giving you the money to show something, and more likely it's going to show some positive. But again, for someone to show you, okay, the real context of what we're sort of discussing here on a science or a modern science research paper or review of it is not really going to happen, because again, it's not going to profiteer someone. But again, with that, I would say, yeah, there's probably more context of consuming milk alongside like where milk production's greater or greatest. Because again, I don't think it should be influenced by like forced production. So again, that would be, again, you'd probably see the change in context within milk, within butter, with the color of the beta carotene occurring in the summer. And again, on sort of like human fat or lipid metabolism, again, I'd probably say that like butter would be sort of like a summer, autumn food more so, opposed to in the winter. And again, that would be sort of a change within the fatty acids that you probably see in that product. Because again, it's a bit like, with carbohydrates, with fruit and vegetables, there's a seasonal premise of them. Well, again, it's actually the same thing with fats. Again, saturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats. Again, these specific chains within that, again, they vary between seasons as well. And again, the human lipid content varies within season as well. So again, that would be things like LDL and HDL. They're lipoproteins. They're not really associated too much with this, but again, they change. Again, there's ups and peaks with these. It's the same thing within the animal. There'd likely be more saturated fat in the summer per se than in the winter. And again, like squirrels would have this premise of like hibernation and getting fat for the winter. Humans, depending where you are, background, they would have this sort of same concept going on as well.
So would you say less or more fat during winter? I thought it was for this region in Europe.
So again, ideally you'd be using your own body fat. That's just how it works. Okay. So again, a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet or a high fat diet doesn't actually mean you need to add excess fat into the body. Again, it should be actually utilizing your own body fat more so, or again, on a ratio. I don't know of the exact ratio, 70-30% that you're using your own body fat. Again, that's what we actually probably want clinically, because like I said, there's like a fluff should be coming with the end of summer, because again, there's abundance of food from proteins, fats, and carbs, and you got the reinforced light signal to actually enhance more growth pathways and more disruption of the circadian rhythm with sleep. Because again, your light period in Amsterdam or Holland is likely prolonged in the summer. And again, that disrupts your sleep where you sleep less. And again, that basically ties into like poorer lipid metabolism or glucose metabolism. to a certain degree, where you're promoting a little bit of fatness. But again, it's like very small and partial. Okay. But again, that's the fluctuations that you have throughout your whole food and circadian biology. Nothing's basically balanced. This concept of balance within the nutritional space is complete bogus, because again, they're not applying first principles, circadian, seasonal variation, or even photosynthesis. They're literally just searching for something. Again, the only macro balanced food out there would be milk and avocados, basically. And even avocados, they're not like what you probably have in the supermarkets. Again, the avocados here have a season. They're either like they got a lot of water in and they just taste of water. And they call avocados here out, which is basically like water. Or they're very like you would get in the supermarket. They're very like ripe and really meaty. But again, there's variations within these in the tropics with how these are grown. Again, food is never balanced. And again, it's just basically making it very easy for dietitians or the government, where they actually haven't truly explored it. They just basically created their own this food system themselves. And again, a fish, a bird, an insect, it doesn't care what it eats. It just needs to eat. It doesn't care about its glucose response from a food. Again, this whole point about balancing your glucose is just a complete misnomer as well. Again, if you think you need to dress your carbs, again, it's a clear indication that you're eating the wrong carbs at the wrong time of the day or wrong time of the year or out of season. That's the problem. Again, show me a monkey that thinks, oh my God, I'm eating a banana. Let me find some coconut oil to put over it to slow down the glucose response from it. Or let me find some vinegar to have before I'm eating my banana. Again, it really doesn't work like that. But again, it doesn't mean that hasn't got any clinical context. It does. But again, it's understanding first principles where it's just complete misnomer. It just doesn't happen. Like, I think, again, like you catch a wild boar here, like you just eat it. You're not, and again, maybe you harvest it, maybe you process it, maybe you share it out, maybe you have a feast, maybe. But again, like you wouldn't give a two shits about waiting for the best time of day to eat it after you trained or X, Y, and Z. These are just basically concepts which again are just plucked or cherry picked to a certain degree, and then just like overemphasized. And then people in different camps would just use that and support their theory without understanding what I just shared with you. And again, I'm in no dietary camps. I don't give a crap. But again, I do understand that human bodies, we do require basic amino acids and fats, and the carbs are the most variable one, which probably don't even matter that much. Again, like and the people in the carnivore community do okay without eating carbohydrates. So again, it just makes you think about all these theories where it's about balance, or you need carbohydrates, and again, you need to eat 300 grams of carbohydrates when you're sedentary as an adult. It's just complete bogus. Again, you're just being manipulated into this government and pulverized grain industries, or supporting cereals and pasta. And again, it's sort of this backward step in terms of our evolution, because again, these foods do provide you with energy. And again, back then, this would be like great, but now we don't need that. We don't have, in the Western world, we don't have energy shortages. We have energy insufficiency. And again, that's it. It's basically fat is basically stored energy waiting to be used, waiting to be called into action. And if that's not the case, then it's not going to be there. But even then, you need your biology to be on point for actually to utilize the fat without causing an issue. Because again, losing fat induces sort of some stress and oxidative stress to your body. Processing fat causes lipid peroxidation. It's a bit like using glucose. When you use glucose, you cause oxidation as well. It's not a problem. But again, if you're healthy, it's not a problem. But again, if you're inflamed, circadian body's crap, you got a lot of deuterium built up in your body from eating tropical fruits at the wrong time of year. You're not very well at depleting deuterium from your body. Again, this is going to run into problems where things such as DNA mutations or RNA, poor RNA expression, or how receptors are working are all going to sort of backfire. And that's where we basically come to modern diseases, then lead down the line to sort of cancers, as an example.
Well, when you speak about all about the whole process, of consumption of energy, whether it's fat, carbs, sunlight, whatever the environment provides. Then we get to the next stage indeed, which is of course connected to the first stage, but the processing of energy. Like you said, there's not a shortage in energy, but there's an energy insufficiency. So the processing is something that's not going right.
Yeah, well, again, like the processing comes and starts within the brain based on circadian rhythm to instruct, okay, time of day of when to use things. Again, it's a bit like the analogy of applying it to an airport with the controller on the control tower, basically getting the timings of planes leaving and planes arriving. And then obviously that controller connects down to like the people on the ground floor with how the planes are parked, and then they're connected to like the luggage, and then the people are connected to like looking after the passengers and then check-in. So again, there's various steps along the way here of organization. Energy and organization or order are like fundamental and tied together, where there's this linear basically. So again, when you're utilizing energy, you basically have more order and organization there. Again, if you're not ordered and organized, you're not going to be utilizing energy, because again, that's just going to be a misnomer and going to be inducing inflammation. So again, like that has a big point, but again, it manifests as how the brain deciphers that. And the brain deciphers that based on using fat, the influence of the environment basically hitting your fat, a few hormones underpinning that. And again, things like pH, temperature, and again, even on to a smaller scale of understanding hydrogen and the differences between different hydrogens and how your cell and mitochondria actually process that. Because again, there's different types of hydrogen out there in the world in different foods. Again, in the tropics, there'd be foods high in deuterium. Again, that's not a problem in that regard. That again, when you get away from the equator in the tropics, there's less deuterium in the foods. So again, it has context here with how the environment basically reinforces how we utilize food and how it's grown in a seasonal photosynthetic process. And again, that's based on principles such as there's like 3 different types of plants out there, C3, C4, and CAM, and based on this enzyme called ribisco. And again, like most nutritionists don't understand this. But again, they're built around different temperatures and about the light environment with how to cool itself, basically. A bit like how humans use in our metabolism or mitochondria, putting proteins. Okay. And again, this is where people like you and I release a massive amount of heat to keep ourselves warm. But again, this doesn't happen. This malfunctions within obese people, where they can't burn that fat as heat energy, essentially. And that's why literally they're cold and hypothyroid or clinical hypothyroid states. It's because they're unable to uncouple their metabolism, basically. And that's based on the principles of how leptin and even things such as like a transcription called POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin hormone, is working, basically. And again, that interacts and is influenced via the power of light, essentially, on your biology. And again, there's a circadian standpoint with that. So again, if that is broken, again, your metabolism is going to be shit and utilization of energy is going to be crap. And again, you just see the downstream people going around, okay, glucose is high, need to go on a walk after a meal to reduce my triglycerides, blah, blah, blah. I need to eat a lot of fiber to offset the carbohydrates I'm eating. All these sort of tactics, which again are very surface level if you understand the first principles. And again, obviously, if you understand the age, your health of your microbiome, your mobility, how your nervous system's working, this all comes into the picture. Again, physical activity, it all comes into the picture and what shapes sort of your metabolism, basically.
I find it interesting that process that you just described. When I look at myself or at friends, or well, let's take myself for an example. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Yeah, let's talk about you. We can be direct with you.
Yeah, when I wake up, the first thing I do is go outside, take a walk, ground. I do the same at the end of the day. I'll be at a couple of hours a day outside. I do not eat more than necessary. I try to eat local food. I exercise. I can sum up all the healthy things I do, but there's still, and I think a lot of friends and people around me can relate to that. There's still, I wouldn't say a problem, but maybe we can call it a dysfunction because I'm also not losing weight. this is also my journey, this podcast, to discover what is standing in the way of that energy processing, and how can one discover. I think it's valuable for everybody, but how can one discover to improve that processing, that when you took care of what's coming in a little bit, of course,
Yeah.
it's not optimal. I live in the city center of Amsterdam, but if you took care of, like, let's say 80% of what's coming in, so the absorption, how can you work on the processing of the energy that is inside your body?
Yeah, I mean, with the absorption, again, if you want to lose body fat, again, you want less absorption. You want to utilize the fat on your body, basically. And again, you want to your advantage potentially improve your muscle capacity as well. So again, you can encourage that with resistance training as a signal to your systemic body. But again, on the efficiency side of things of how to utilize that, again, there's things such as looking at the primordial way of the human body works, which is again on stress signals, stress adaptation. So again, your brain is feeling very comfortable at its weight, basically. It's not allowing you to reduce it or offset it. Again, the brain needs to be safe and have good signals for allow you to give up this energy storage. So there's some disconnection there with that signaling and how that's being processed. And again, that could be, like we said, cortisol influencing that, where we know cortisol's not a problem. We need it. Cortisol's not a stress hormone. It just turns on when there's stress present. But again, it has direct effects of inhibiting how you're utilizing fats on body fat, but also how different sort of tissues in your body change its metabolism. So again, there's no systemic, okay, cool, I'm fat burning or I'm using glucose here. Again, every single tissue has a sort of different flux of its metabolism. So again, your adipose tissue is very different from your muscles. Your red blood cells is very different from your white blood cells. Your brain's very different from your liver. They're all very delicate and they all have their own sort of fluxes. So it's never one like I'm using glucose or I'm fat burning here. No, even when you're like ketogenic, you're still disposing of glucose and producing lactate and everything else. It's just at a different ratio level, basically. And it'll be different in different tissues. Like we know, red blood cells will just be using glucose, essentially. Because again, they don't have mitochondria to sort of beta oxidize, essentially. So again, there's signals like the effect of the HPA axis, so the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. On top of that, you can look into the thyroid, essentially, and how cortisol influences sort of the expression of certain receptors or the rate of T4 to T3 conversion. Then obviously on that top layer, you've got like how the microbiome's working, or how your liver, your gallbladder, and your pancreas, your digestive system's working to help you excrete out that fat. You obviously got your lungs, you got movement. That's and how you exhale carbon dioxide. Funny enough, that's like one of the means of actually losing body fat is you actually breathe it out. And again, like thyroid have a big role in shaping and influencing that concept of what I said with the uncoupling proteins. Again, around the fat cell, like the adipocyte, again, it has its own sort of metabolism as well. Within it's got immune cells. And again, like on a tissue sort of level, immune cells, or on a cell level, immune cells would probably be like the third most demanding energy consuming process. And again, within there's like different signals which would be influencing like macrophages and how they're going to let go or give up fat tissue. How well are your mitochondria actually working? Do you have a healthy colony of mitochondria actually in a state of abundance? Or again, is this sort of cell danger response on where they're not going to be working in your favor to utilize fat? And again, there could be nutritional insufficiencies there. There could be a defect in acetyl L-carnitine. So there could be a defect within your methylation, which you might need more support on a basic level of consuming more folate or B12 or zinc, influencing methionine reductase enzyme. Or again, might need be some more support with glutathione, peroxidase to allow you to actually make water within your mitochondria. and inside your cell. There could be some structure issues with how you're making collagen or sulfated compounds like glycosaminoglycans. And again, these would be like the scaffolding of your cell, but they're actually very pivotal within your adipocytes. Within your adipocyte, there's this sort of collagen network which holds them in place. Now, cells don't just like bubble and move around free flowing with, they're in basically like this web, like a spider web. And that's where your fascia, your collagen network comes into the picture. And again, typically these are all sort of salted compounds. And again, how well is your sulfation system working? But again, there has to be some entry going in where you are eating less or you're being more efficient with your output to create a sort of defect. But at the same time, your brain essentially needs to be comfortable in doing so and giving up and feeling safe and abundant, basically. And again, like therapy at the right time can be a very good means of doing that. And again, it reinforces things as well. But again, it's utilizing the environment as well. Like, funny enough, like I don't actually eat that much food, and I'm around like 97 kilos, and I'm pretty strong. But again, I don't count anything, but I probably eat maybe like 1,800, 2,200 calories a day, if that. Again, I don't count it, so I'm just like eyeballing that. But again, like, it's pretty easy for me to not feel hungry and not need to eat a lot. Because why? Well, again, I've got so much charge in my body, I don't need to eat a lot. Again, I understand energy systems or bioenergetics. It's not purely derived from food. It's derived on like your semiconductors that charge. It's derived on your water networks within your body that holds this sort of charge, the redox. It's hold on like how much you're grounding, how much your cells and water's picking up and influencing with photons to actually excite electrons within your body. So again, when you understand this, you realize that you actually don't need to eat that much food if you're really dialed in, connected. And again, the issue, like is that you live in Amsterdam, which is one of the problems, which again is not a reason and an excuse. It's just, it's harder.
Yeah, it makes it definitely more difficult.
And again, it just, 100%. And again, that's where you are going to get, and again, it's something I'm aware of, like when I was in Abu Dhabi, it's much more easier to eat more because again, you're outside less because it's just so hot to go outside. And again, you're insulted with all the artificial light and the EMF. Again, what does that do? Well, again, it's been shown to change glucose regulation in your body. It changes how the first principles of a cell works with water and these electrolyte systems, or calcium, magnesium working, and potassium. And again, that's changing the charge. So again, it's just harder. But again, it's not impossible. Because again, I've got a client in the UK who's a personal trainer. He's lost 21 kilos since November last year. And again, he hasn't had to count anything.
Impressive.
He hasn't had to do excessive cardio. And again, he's relatively fit and healthy. He was just a little bit. And again, generally, when you improve optimal health, everything becomes easier. You don't need to become a psychopath and download calorie counting apps. You allow your brain, your fat tissue, your immunity to work together and sense the inside in biology. The inside and outside of the world. So let me start again. When you get optimal health, basically it becomes easy. You're basically working with your fat tissue, your brain, your immunity, and they're picking up the environmental. They're picking up the signals on the inside and outside of your body.
Are you still here?
So again, I'm still there. So again, it's just, are you, again, there's some like wise ass calorie guys that like, are you really eating what you think you're eating, basically? So again, you could say I'm eating healthy, but again, you could be devouring ribeye steaks and bone marrow and dark chocolate and nut butters because they're healthy, or are you eating caveman cookies as an example? But again, that's still energy dense. It still has to go somewhere. And again, it's just being wise with your food choices, being selective, especially in the Western world, selected of what you should be eating, because again, that's just going to hijack and destroy what you shouldn't be eating, basically. So again, hunger and satiety are massive signals. And again, they're basically at the brain level. But again, if you feel full and like, I can't put anything in the body, I'm going to be sick. Like that, again, that might need to be flexed for you to combat junk food here, there, and everywhere, basically. So again, someone eating like a large amount of eggs and steak in the morning, again, that person not wanting to eat again till like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by that time they're home and they can prepare their dinner, again, that would be a great thing to be doing. But
And
again, it would be understanding that if someone's healthy enough to do that.
but when you start to gain more of that understanding, more of that knowledge which you just shared with us, you you have to know if that thyroid is working, if the adrenals are working, if the microbiome is in check. So how can we test that? How do we generally?
Yeah, well, yeah. So again, like standard thyroid testing would just be abysmal, where it would just be looking at maybe T4 or total T4 or free T4, or maybe they throw in TSH in there as well, so thyroid stimulating hormone as well. Again, maybe if you go to a bit more advanced practitioner, they might throw in free T3. There might be some thyroid antibodies in there. So again, you can actually have a better look of what's going around or what's going on. But again, you need to understand how feedback loops work. And again, how cellular biology works to understand how to read that. So even that can actually give you a false premise of what's actually operational as well. So again, it's not actually uncovering enzymes. So that's a big problem. It's not uncovering transporters. So actually how we move things in and out of the cell. So again, that's a big misnomer as well. So again, you can't purely just go from like looking at a blood test standpoint of view of how your thyroid's working per se. Again, an old school trick would be looking at like your body temperature in the morning. That would be like a sort of gold standard way of looking at how your metabolism is working, basically.
Should it be cold or warm?
Well, again, there's a seasonal, there's a variation between a day, but again, it should be at a unique temperature in the morning. Again, I actually personally don't use this that much, so it's not at the top of my tongue, but like 97.6, I believe, Fahrenheit. That's what it should be. Maybe I'm wrong, so don't shoot me for that.
Mhm.
But it's around about that. Maybe it's like 96, 97. So you can fact check me on that. But like that'll be just indicating of what's going on. With like the adrenals or how cortisol's working, again, there's things like the adrenal stress index, which is looking at saliva standpoint. But again, even that is a bit more contextual because then you should really be getting like DHEA within that. Really should be looking at like melatonin within that as well. But again, generally, a practitioner, a clinician should know there's signs of like sort of low cortisol activity. Now, again, if you measure cortisol in a blood test, it's going to be fairly sort of neutral and in range. It will be very abnormal on the autoimmune scale of it being high or low. So again, a saliva test actually shows you what's more active and free within the tissues, and a better indicator. Plus, you'll be doing it 4 times in a day. So again, you could see what's going on there. But again, even there's been studies to show that a one-time adrenal saliva stress index test, it is not adequate enough. You probably need to do 5 consecutive days of doing it. I think it was 3 or 5 or even 7 consecutive days of doing it to actually get a true reflection and fair chance of seeing what's really going on.
Is that doable in just for just
No,
a regular
yeah, I
citizen?
mean, if you got the money to do so, sure. But again, most people, again, I personally I wouldn't test most people for that. Again, I'm not a massive believer in like functional medicine testing all the time or from the get go,
What does that
because again, it's just
mean?
pointless. So yeah, so again, if a client comes to me and there's a number of issues and they got fundamental things not working or they're not doing, what would be the point of me testing them? Because again, it wouldn't be a fair result. It wouldn't be a fair indication. It would just be a waste of money and me basically flexing my ego of using you as a starting point and then an end point. When instead it would be like getting things in place and then potentially explore testing, which are more specific of, okay, what do we need to look into now? What's your weakest link? Would it be looking at thyroid profile? And then we would actually have a healthier and more clearer view of that test without the pitfalls. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm using AirPods. Or you know what? I'm not eating X, Y, or Z. Or you know what? Blah, blah, blah. So again, once we sort of empower, or once I empower them on the first principles and get them up to scratch with how the holobiome sort of works, then again, there's no point in testing everything, basically. Because again, like as a nutritionist, what you are educated in, you're educated in test companies and supplements educating you, basically. So again, like you need to take this test, here are the supplements for that to correct that test issue, then you retest afterwards. It's like very bad practice. And again, it's conflict. It's like conventional medicine, basically, in the functional medicine space. Again, these tests are not cheap. And again, I'm not a cheap practitioner either. So again, that's the value of working with me, is in hindsight, you don't test as much and you likely save money in the long run. But again, that's the difference. That's the difference in truly being or having wisdom instead of being taught about protocols and how to think for yourself, basically, which again, not all functional medicine practitioners do. And I don't want to throw them underneath the bus, because obviously they are a step in the right direction. But again, they're still obviously ignorant of what they don't know, basically, as well.
It's such a difficult path when you start on such a journey, right? For a regular person who is mildly interested in health and maybe concerned with their own health, it is quite difficult, right? To keep everything in check, to keep everything in balance. Maybe that's a better way to put
Well,
it.
again, here it's not. Where you are, it's more difficult, like we said. Again, it's dependent on like what you're listening to. Are you listening to Biohack Bob, who's basically slandering everything and basically saying life is so toxic, it's not even healthy to breathe anymore? So again, if you're facing those fears and being inflicted by that every single day, of course you're going to be thinking the worst. Now, again, is what does having that knowledge actually change? It's still going to be about cultivating optimal health at the end of the day, because that's your best and number one defense in the modern world. So cultivating and empowering yourself with how to build optimal health, how to charge yourself in a decentralized fashion is key. Again, it's a bit like listening to the government about money or about how to invest in with the money that you earn. It's like it's conflicted. It's a problem. It's just basically all tied together where you don't have any freedom. And health is all about, and your life should, in my opinion, should all be about freedom. Again, we're not zoo animals. We are human beings. And again, I think that should be applied with understanding your health in a sort of decentralized fashion where you should be able to think for yourself. Where, again, we're not manipulated. We're not drenched in information galore. We're literally experiencing and being it because we got the awareness of understanding literally how life works. But again, it's not what is educated in schools. It's not what's passed down now from parents, from family, which maybe once was way back when, about how to feed a family, about how to do harvesting, about how to ration food, about how not to use like artificial light at night, to be going to bed at a reasonable hour, about being respectable to other people, about looking at people in their eyes, essentially shaking hands with a firm grip. And again, even that's an energy exchange right there. And again, even when you're looking in someone's eye, you're basically looking at them straight down the brain level, because again, it all goes straight down to the brain from the retinal hypothalamic tract. So again, understanding these principles is the key, because again, it doesn't change much. Again, the world's only going to get even worse. It's only going to get more polluted, more concentrated in the shit. It's still not going to change anything. Knowing more about it is not going to change it. Sure, if you've got the financial capacity and freedom to buy air purifiers, filters, and again, some simple things like swapping glass or plastic and stuff like that, sure, that's definitely a great point and discussion there. And again, it definitely does help. But again, it still doesn't explain how energy and order fundamentally works within the human body.
No, I agree. And I definitely learn each day again and again. And what helps me most from what you're saying as well is understanding the whole concept of energy and connecting with everything around you. You also talk about energy release. That was the third aspect of the whole process. What do you mean exactly by that? The
Again, sorry.
release, the release of the energy.
Okay, so when you release energy, it's a bit okay. This is the cool part. So again, like the sun, like the sun actually has sort of like a nuclear reactor in it to do with helium and hydrogen essentially. And again, it produces photons. Same thing occurs within your mitochondria, basically. So again, we have like little stars, literally, or little suns in our mitochondria, which emit. And again, most people know that there's infrared light released inside the mitochondria. And again, this has this sort of hydrating, a charge effect in that water that you just produce from that reaction as well. So again, a free radical also produces light. It produces that EMF signal. And the EMF is just electromagnetic frequency or wavelength or on spectrum. So again, a free radical releases light. When you produce energy, you release light. So again, when you cut yourself, you're releasing light to basically wound heal. When you kiss someone, you're releasing light and that sort of associated connection. Again, smell, sweat. Again, it's an exchange on that EMF spectrum, basically. Sound. Again, humans release sound as well from our voices, from humming, from singing. That's again releasing energy out there into this open system. I try to sing to some reggaeton Spanish music, but not too much. I mean, I talk a lot, so that's my vocal flex right there.
Really,
but yeah, but again, it's just like that's kind of interesting when you tie that back to like tribal people with singing and humming. And again, that's sort of like the advancement of human evolution with language, essentially, and communication. Communication is a means of organization, basically. So I mean, we got energy there, but how can we express that? Oh, okay, we can express it through language, which now provides some order and organization. So again, it's an investment process, part and parcel of human physiology. Again, other animals have language, but for us, it's just sound, it's noise. Like birds chirping, I can hear my parrots just like, meh. For me, it's just noise, but for them, it's actually an exchange of communication. It's the exchange of information, basically. But again, so we release light, and again, that has a big role in signaling within the body. And again, it comes back to what we absorb. So again, we absorb light, but we also emit it as well. So again, people, the phrase, oh, that person's got good energy, or that person resonated with me very well. That person's got good calm or an aura about them. Basically, what you're describing is that person's interacting with you and you're in a sort of coherent domain with them. So you're entangled and you're picking up their frequency very well. And again, that's sort of applies on an individual scale. So again, there's no rights or wrong with you vibing with someone, or it's just where you're at, basically. But again, there's basically like this spectrum, this energy field around you. Again, of course, we can't visually see that. But again, on a quantum level, it would be around you. And again, it would be a bit like, how do dogs know, or cats know, maybe more so dogs, but when you're sad, again, they come up to you. And again, I think there was a guy who's got this book called, this is the problem when you read so much, you forget book titles. But again, I think the name's called Jerry. It's about, and it's an energy book. He's an ophthalmologist from the US. But again, the book's basically about energy medicine. And he was making a point about how when people had cancer in certain parts of their body, that dogs would basically lay on that part of their tissue to basically give it energy, basically. So obviously the human body is releasing this sort of subtle energy or information out. The dog is picking this up, and then basically it's sensing it, and it's basically giving it charge. Because again, when you touch someone, you're basically a bit like grounding, you're picking up their energy as well. But animals do that. So that's something unique. And again, it's also something like mosquitoes, although it's a bit more complex. And again, it can come down to certain levels, but again, they can probably sense light being released from our metabolism to know what person to really go for. But again, it could also be on top of that to do with like lactic acid within the sweat, spending their glucose on their sweat, all these sort of things, because again, what they're after the blood. And again, that means that they're probably sensing our blood essentially. So we're emitting something from our blood, our charge, which they're picking up. And on top of that, within our blood, like it's typically gringos or Europeans that come to the tropics that get stung by mosquitoes. Well, why? Well, we have less melanin. We are probably emitting more light than local people, because local people in this area would have more pigmentation, would have more melanin. So maybe they are actually or absorbing that light released in their blood better than white people, because again, we are white and we basically absorb more light, but we would also likely release more light in that response as well.
Wow. It's a process, but it is so fascinating, and I get so passionate about it that if we just, quote unquote, just get more in touch with nature and the understanding of the energy transmission between cells, but also between people, between your environment, then we would highly improve in our own health and also in our life in general, is what I believe, is what I take from your story. I think this was already very valuable. So we spoke about energy absorption, energy processing, and energy release. Is there anything else you would like to add for the listener in a practical way that they can apply to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're, again, you can't really measure energy in the human body, but again, you can measure your awareness, your state of feeling. You can measure how warm you feel. You can gauge these things from self-awareness. And self-awareness is like the first step and tool to really utilize if you really want to change and just see your change within your health. So again, applying some awareness. And again, it doesn't mean just outsource it to Aura Ring, Whoop Band to track HRV. No, because again, you're outsourcing this. You need to do it from an inside job perspective of really seeing how you're improving your health. And again, it takes a few minutes a day just to sit with yourself. And again, that could be at any point, and just like reflecting. And again, with no judgment, just seeing how you're doing and checking in with yourself, basically. I think that's a very key, important concept. And again, especially when, like, as a male, it's like very egotistical, where we want to hide and shun responsibility or of going within, basically. I think females probably got more emotional stability opposed to men. But again, I do think it's for both sexes, for all people, just to have a bit more self-awareness of when they're sort of trying to improve their energy. Because like I said, it's very hard to actually measure energy on a quantitative sort of premise. But again, you should really know how you feel. Like I said, throughout this whole podcast, I feel phenomenal. Again, I don't have a marker to prove that. And again, I could just be full of bullshit myself. But again, I think I know myself very, very well. And again, I don't really have that much of an ego per se, especially when it comes to myself and feeling myself. And again, I've got nothing to prove or to lie or hide. But again, having that is a real valuable and decentralized way of understanding and knowing yourself and knowing your health better than any guru or practitioner like myself or influencer or doctor or whatever title. You knowing yourself and being connected to yourself is the most important asset. Otherwise, you're literally like going to be a sheep or disattached to you in this universe.
I think that's a beautiful message, to be more decentralized when it comes to your own health. And I think that mainly goes through getting more in touch with and feeling more in your body. There was also something I saw on social media. You didn't want to spill all the juice, but there's something going on in your life?
Well, I mean, there's always something going on. But like I've essentially formulated or created a food brand, which is called Oath Foods Co., Oath Foods Company. Essentially, it's a food product, so food first principle. Again, it's on the concept of making life easier for people in the modern world. And again, it's about encouraging a nose to tail culture for kids, for families, to support their growth and development, to support their immunity, and to basically have an ancestral paleo or paleo twist for their nutrition. So again, basically it's instead of just having like a beef burger with preservatives in, again, what we've created is a nose to tail spin on that burger or sausage. So again, we're using regenerative sort of produce, adding value back into the environment, but also adding value to human health as well. So again, this company is in the UK at the moment, and again, we're just still starting up. So again, there's still a long way to go, but so it's early stages. But again, the feedback from what we're doing, and again, the product itself is literally amazing. So again, there shouldn't be a need of using desiccated, freeze-dried organs, basically from New Zealand, which have, again, a massive transportation and a logistic dilemma. It's literally setting up a sort of local regenerative culture about respecting the animal, and again, encouraging the people to know where their food is coming from. And again, we hope to do that in schools. We hope to do that and educate parents and incorporate it in a healthy and fun, tasteful way to nurture, essentially. So again, that's exciting to come. I think it would probably be like 2 months until we launch, and again, it would be directly within. So again, at this moment in time, not with supermarkets or anything like that. And again, that'll actually probably be a better step to be doing anyway, because again, we would be able to control for the packaging, much better transportation. And again, it would just be a very, like, ideally like a carbon neutral company, basically, and maybe a net negative, essentially, if you're buying directly from us, opposed to using like a corporate supermarket, which again basically destroys you on all fronts, but again has plastics, that has shelf life stability issues, and again it takes out the profit of adding value back in, basically, where again we could keep the price competitive as much as possible from that standpoint. So again, we can spread it around the whole country and beyond in Europe and different countries around the world, because again, the infrastructure should be fairly simple to replicate, basically. But again, so that's exciting. That's to come. So again, look out for like the all-in sort of burger, because again, this is actually food. This is the issue that I find with organ supplements. Again, it's taking you out of the experience. Again, you're eating something that's freeze-dried from New Zealand, that's been shipped. And again, these people don't disclose these air miles or anything like that. And again, they package it in glass. That glass has, like, again, another weight for the transportation of these people recycling it, everything else. And again, is it really the same? Is it in the same matrix? Is it the same experience? No, again, you're taking a supplement and you're not really cherishing that experience. So again, humans need to eat. Humans need food. We don't need supplements per se. When you're eating, it's an experience. And again, that was the important message as well when I was like creating this. It's an experience. And again, it should be around the table. They should be talking about the meat. They should be talking about where the food's come. They should be talking about why they're eating this, why there is a bit of tongue in the sausage. What does tongue have in it that's unique? And again, it's an experience to be shared and cultivated. So again, a supplement is literally just popping something in your mouth and forgetting about it. Where again, if you are investing in the food experience, it's having a long-lasting, more powerful, energetic experience compared to a supplement. And again, it's not just credit supplements or organ supplements. And again, it's likely better to have an organ supplement than not eat anything organ related. Again, the ideal thing would literally just be stop being a chicken and literally just eat some liver. But again, I think there's a means of like education and integration of using like a food product with a twist, basically. And again, everyone typically eats burgers and sausages or meatballs. Again, we're just providing a means of making it a step up and an upgrade, basically. So that's what's happening. Oh, food. So again, if you sign up to a newsletter, which will be shortly be putting out there, that'll be entitling you to like first news, to be like one of the first, the VIPs, basically, of getting like first dibs, first offers, first chance of future brand investment going in the know, basically. So again, sign up to a newsletter. You can find it on our website, which is just like ofu.com or .co.uk. Again, it should be available very soon, depending on when this podcast comes out. So look out for it. We're also on social media, so you can check us out there as well.
I think it is the concept that fits your profession perfectly, and I hope and I'm sure that it will be very valuable for a lot of people. This podcast will air the 3rd of September, it's like the day after tomorrow.
Okay, so, that's fast.
Very fast, yeah. I like to put it out soon so that it is still fresh. But it sounds like a wonderful concept, and I cannot wait to see that evolve as well. Is there any last message you wanted to share? Even after 1 hour and 40 minutes, there must be...
I mean, what my bread and butter is health optimization medicine. So again, if you're interested in working together, just check out my website. And again, there's a complimentary discovery consultation. So again, if you're keen, if you're ready, if you looked at how I work, what's involved, then book a call. And again, we can discuss your obstacles, your needs, what my thoughts would be about the process, and the next steps forward in working together, basically, and decentralizing your health. That's it. I hope you got some value after an hour and 42 minutes of me rambling on. But again, like it's really not that complicated, although maybe we touched upon here and there bioenergetics on a quantum level. It's not that difficult, or the application is really not that difficult. But again, there's loads of contexts involved, and that's what sort of decentralized health optimization gives you. And again, it's about working for you and with you instead of being like egotistical or shoving a narrative in your brain that, again, you need to be paleo, or you need to be vegan, or it's this way, or you need this test and this is the problem, or it's literally just about methylation in your genes. Well, no. Again, like methylation ties into bioenergetics. And again, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But again, it's all connected, and a decentralized health optimization clinician like myself. Again, I'm not a specialist in one part, but again, I have a firm grip in multiple systems, in how they connect and integrate, and tying the pieces together clinically in the real world. And again, I don't think everyone lives like I live or should live like I live. It's about you. And that's the most important thing. And that's it. But thanks for having me. And maybe round 3 down the line.
Oh, most definitely. You're a friend of the show, so we'll redo it in the near future. I'm happy we just squeezed an extra message at the end of this podcast, and I think we should do it again. I want to thank you for your time, Ryan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And until next time, have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.